The lights are about to go out, but instead of focusing on reaction times, you're frantically revving your engine for 10 seconds just to keep it alive. Get it wrong and you become a stationary hazard in the path of a car doing over 200 kph. This isn't a nightmare scenario from the 1980s, but merely the reality of Formula 1 in 2026. And as we are about to explain, one team has ensured that this recipe for disaster is here to stay. The 2026 regulations were supposed to usher in a new era of sustainable, manufacturer-friendly racing. Instead, pre-season testing in Bahrain has plunged F1 into a state of panic. Drivers are calling the new launch procedures a mess, and the spectre of a major start line incident looms large over the season opener in Melbourne. But why are these new power units so difficult to get off the line? And why did Ferrari single-handedly block the rule change that would have fixed it? The answer lies deep in the technical regulations and a political gamble that could decide the championship. To understand why the drivers are so worried, we first have to look at what has actually changed under the engine cover. For over a decade, F1 drivers have had it relatively easy at the start. The complex hybrid systems, specifically the MGU-H, allowed the car to pre-spin the turbocharger electrically. This meant instant power, zero lag, and a smooth getaway. But in 2026, to appease new manufacturers like Audi, the MGU-H is gone. That might sound like a minor technical tweak, but on the starting grid, it changes everything. Without that electrical assistance, drivers are suddenly facing massive turbo lag. To get these cars off the line, you can't just drop the clutch and go, you have to build up exhaust energy manually. The result is a procedure that feels archaic and incredibly stressful. To minimize that lag, drivers now have to keep the turbo spooled up for around 10 seconds before the lights go out. You'll see and hear drivers sitting on the grid with their engines screaming at high revs, desperately trying to keep the turbine spinning. Audi driver Gabriel Bortoleto summed it up perfectly in Bahrain. It's complicated. The 10-second thing, and then after 5 seconds, I already lost count. Then the engine's revving up, it's gear in and out, it's quite a mess. But here's the thing that most people miss. It's not just about the revving engine. The regulations introduce a knife-edge scenario regarding the battery. The new MGU-K packs a massive punch, 350 kilowatts of power, but the rules strictly forbid using it to propel the car until it reaches 50 kph. This leaves a terrifying dead zone. From 0 to 50 kilometers an hour, the driver is entirely reliant on the internal combustion engine. If they haven't spooled the turbo perfectly during that 10-second window, or if they fumble the clutch release, the engine bogs down. There is no electrical torque field to save them. Haas driver Ollie Behrman noted that the difference between a good start and a terrible one is now minuscule. He warned that if you're too late or too early by half a second on the procedure, the start simply doesn't work and it leads to anti-stall. If the procedure itself is difficult, the logistics of the grid make it nearly impossible for some drivers. The start sequence in Formula 1 is rigid. Once the last car slots into its grid box, the medical car moves to the back and the light sequence begins. Historically, this happens quickly, but remember the 2026 cars need up to 10 seconds of preparation time to get that turbo spinning. This creates a terrifying inequity for the back of the grid. The driver on pole position sits there for a long time waiting for the grid to form. They have plenty of time to run through their 10-second spool-up procedure, but what about the driver in 20th place? Valtteri Bottas, driving for Cadillac, has raised a serious alarm about this. He pointed out that if he starts at the back, he simply might not have enough time between stopping his car and the lights going out to actually get the turbo spinning. Is there enough time where the lights start to go on? The answer, terrifyingly, appears to be no. If the light sequence triggers while the drivers at the back are still rushing to initiate their spool up, they will be launching with zero boost. While the cars ahead rocket away, the back markers will be crawling off the line, struggling to reach that critical 50 kph threshold where the battery kicks in. This isn't just about losing positions. Oscar Piastri at McLaren has called this a recipe for disaster. He warns that the speed differential won't be a few kilometers per hour. It will be the difference between a car accelerating normally and a car that is effectively stranded. You can be losing 6 or 7 spots if it doesn't go well, Piastri said, noting that with a pack of 22 cars launching with less downforce, the potential for a pileup is massive. In a moment, we'll look at the shambolic scenes from testing that proved Piastri right, but first we have to ask, if everyone knows this is dangerous, why hasn't the rule been changed? This is where the story shifts from engineering to high-stakes politics. Safety concerns regarding these starts didn't just appear in Bahrain. The teams have known about the turbo lag issue for a long time. In fact, the Sporting Advisory Committee proposed a solution last summer: simply mandate a longer delay between the last car forming up and the lights going out. This would give everyone, including the back markers, the guaranteed time needed to spool their turbos. It seemed like a common sense fix for a safety issue, but the proposal was blocked, and the man standing in the way was Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur. Ferrari exercised its right to resist the change, and their reasoning was ruthless. Vasseur argued that the difficulties with turbo lag were baked into the 2026 rules from the start. He claims that he warned the other teams about this months ago and his concerns were dismissed. Consequently, Ferrari went away and designed their engine specific to handle this problem. Sources suggest Ferrari has opted for a smaller turbocharger or a specific engine architecture that spools up faster and doesn't require the agonizingly long 10-second time prep. By blocking the rule change, Ferrari is essentially weaponizing the start procedure. They have built a car that can launch effectively under the current tough rules compared to competitors. If the FIA were to lengthen the start sequence to help Mercedes, Honda and Audi, it would penalize Ferrari for doing a better job. As Vasseur sees it, if other teams have made concept decisions that did not work with the start regulation, that's their problem. They have to live with it. It would be unfair to force Ferrari, who compromised their design to ensure good starts, to accommodate rivals who prioritize peak power over drivability. Even rivals have had to grudgingly accept this logic. While McLaren boss Andrea Stella has called for the FIA to intervene on safety grounds, noting that this is bigger than any competitive interest, the reality is that F1 is a shark tank. If Ferrari has an advantage off the line, they aren't going to give it up for free. We got a preview of exactly what this chaos looks like during the final pre-season test in Bahrain. In the closing minutes of the session, 7 cars lined up for a practice start. What followed was described as shambolic. It began with Alpine's Franco Colapinto nearly crashing just trying to arrive at his grid spot because he was caught out warming his tyres, a symptom of the low grip nature of these cars. Then, as the light sequence triggered, the disparity in readiness became obvious. Oscar Piastri, sitting on the front row, didn't move at all when the lights went out. Behind him, only half the cars managed to launch. While Piastri later clarified that this specific incident was due to a misunderstanding of instructions rather than a mechanical failure, the visual was striking. It showed a grid in total disarray, with cars stationary while others weaved around them. It fueled the narrative that F1 is walking into a crisis. Pierre Gasly, after experiencing the start, offered a grim warning to the fans. "I advise you to be sitting with your TV on in Australia, because it could be one that everybody remembers." He didn't mean that in a good way. The FIA is now in a bind. The F1 Commission is set to meet to discuss fresh talks about the start sequence. The options are limited. They could force a delay in the light sequence, overruling Ferrari on safety grounds, or they could allow the battery MGUK to be used immediately off the line to fill the torque gap. But allowing battery usage at 0 kph is a complex regulatory change that would require remapping every engine on the grid, something teams are loath to do weeks before the first race. And overruling Ferrari usually leads to legal threats and political fallout that can last for seasons. The uncomfortable truth is that Formula One may have backed itself into a corner it cannot escape before Melbourne. The 2026 rules were designed to attract Audi and keep Honda, and the cost was the MGUH. We are now seeing the bill for that decision come due. We have cars that struggle to charge their batteries, struggle to corner at speed, and struggle to simply leave the starting line without stalling. The solutions proposed, like delaying the start lights, are merely band-aids over a fundamental engineering flaw. The internal combustion engine on its own struggles to move these heavy cars without the hybrid assistance we took for granted. Ferrari has played a masterstroke by anticipating this, designing a car that can handle the chaos, and then blocking the life raft for their rivals. It's ruthless, it's brilliant and entirely within the rules, but it leaves the rest of the grid and the FIA praying that when the lights go out in Australia, the drivers at the back can react fast enough to avoid the cars stalled in front of them. As it stands, the 2026 season opener is set to be less of a race and more of a survival test. The question isn't whether the starts will be messy. It's how many safety cars will need to clean up the aftermath. Chaos on the grid is just one symptom of wider problems facing the 2026 regulations. If you want to understand why Fernando Alonso thinks the team chef could drive these cars and why the engines sound broken in the corners, click the video on screen now where we break down the brutal reality of this new generation.